Two men on the MLK. They were Marine snipers.
What do you think about JFK?
Uh,
Because that Chaos book tells us that the guy who shot the guy was MK Ultra.
Well, let me tell you this. I got an invitation after I had done this King thing from some retired Dallas detectives, including the person that discovered the rifle in the Eyrie at the book depository. The one who said, I walked in, was talking to the building superintendent. We had to go get the elevator because you couldn't summon it. You had to physically walk up. So you had to leave the basement area where the guy's office was, walk across to the other side of the building on the first floor, then take the stairs up. So as we were walking across the first floor, here comes Lee Harvey Oswald. So I stopped him, and the building soup said, hey, he works here. So at that point, I noticed the elevator travel down to my right. You could see it come down from the top floor, and it went down to the basement. We went on and walked over and got up to the top. I just passed Lee Harvey Oswald, and when I got up there, I found the Carcano rifle. I sealed the room, and I'm the one that discovered it. Now, there's some other interesting stuff on that. We went and looked, and it was interesting in that the very limo that Kennedy and the governor were riding in was being operated along the course so everybody could see it. Now, I don't think the shot came from the grassy knoll for a very good reason. If anybody was standing along the curbside, Kennedy's head would have been hitting them about right there. You would have had to have counted on being nobody between you and your target, which from the situation was not going to happen. But from the pictures they had 6 or 7 box cars that were on the tracks. There were 7 railroad tracks on this bridge. There was only one cop, and he was looking at the parade. The car comes in, and as it's looking from the bridge, it's on the same level as the bridge. Then it drops down, and it swings over. But for the count of 7, it's going straight on, and the target is less than 100 yards away, which is point blank for a rifle. Here's the other thing. I had done a lot of ballistic experimentation. In fact, I've testified as a ballistics expert in front of juries, jurors. So I said, if you've got a hole that's a clean hole in the windshield, that means the bullet came from the front. If it came from the back, like they claim, the windshield is bulged out like somebody's head hit it. So find that and go do it. And they called me up later, said, you're right. If you shoot that kind of windshield from the rear, it bulges out. If you shoot it from the front, it's a clean hole. So they got these carbon fiber rods of various calibers, 25 caliber, 30 caliber, 25 caliber, fits right through there. And it lines up with the bridge. Now, at the time this happened, there was a passageway through the bridge with openings from that passageway out facing the way the limo's coming, because it had been an old bridge that they put in the 19th century with gas lines for gas lighting. And there are these 7 boxcars, including at least one that was lined up directly with that shot. Now, here's the thing about the Carcano. There was an identifiable print on it. We went over this at some great length, and they said we couldn't hook this identifiable print up until a few weeks ago, which is why we called you. So, well, what did you get? Said, we got through this Freedom of Information Act thing from the Assassinations Record and Review Bureau, where by act of Congress, reinforced by an executive order by George Herbert Walker Bush and then Clinton, All federal agencies were directed to send all records on that. So we got this, and they let me see it. Billy Saul Estes was in federal custody. He'd been sentenced for some racketeering. He had worked up a deal through his lawyers that if it checked out, they were going to recommend that he get immediate clemency. He gave some names, and they ran the names that they got from this discovery years after the fact, and bingo, that person's fingerprints were what was on the Carcano rifle. And there was also another location, and they were talking about how Oswald was acting when they took him into custody. So when we went into this, and then they went through and they tested to see where the bullet should have come from, they did something else. The medical examiner for the state of Texas, chief medical examiner who did the autopsy on Kennedy, also operated a chain of funeral homes. Okay, the person whose fingerprint comes back with a bingo winds up dead in a supposed one-car wreck in Desert, Texas, broad daylight. They get an order to exhume his body from the graveyard. There's no body in the grave. There's an empty coffin. Okay, they're dealing with a U.S. attorney at the time who became a federal judge. The guy's name is Stephen Trott. I met him when I was in UCLA. And he promised them that he'd get the clemency, but the FBI came back and said negative. But they didn't know about the rest of it because he gave some names, and one of the names that he gave was the person. Now, there is a Marie Brown that I talked to. She's no relation, and she was LBJ's mistress, and she said she was at that party the night before Kennedy got killed, and he said JFK didn't have any part of it. He said, but he knew something because he said, damn, these guys have gone crazy. They're talking about taking out the president. What the hell? And she said he was very troubled. Now, she had a kid with him in 1965. I met the guy, looked just like LBJ. Same size, build, big ears, looks just like him. I also met another son he had in 1966 by a black White House secretary, looked just like him. Marie Brown introduced us, and this has been 26 years ago. So it's interesting what was going on. Now, when Trott got the report back from the FBI said there was nothing to it. The detectives accepted it at the time, but they did not realize that they had this information with the print until 30 years later, they went and ran the damn thing. So now, the medical examiner is an interesting person. There had been a series of assassinations, murders for contract, and somebody who got shot 12 times survived. The house was set on fire. He was severely burned, but in spite of getting shot, he survived. He fingers the medical examiner as his attempted killer. So wow. They take the medical examiner into custody, right? He's getting transported to a courthouse in Dallas for a preliminary hearing. He supposedly tries to escape, and they shoot him multiple times, they say. So they went to go dig this guy up, and there's no body in the grave either. And it's his graveyard, so they're going, wait a minute, what is this? This is like witness protection. In other words, the medical examiner who does the autopsy on Kennedy is supposedly killed for being a hitman. The guy that seems to have been involved with being a hitman, he doesn't have a body in the grave. What's going on? So they're taking me all around to look at all of this. So that's an untold story. And the guy whose fingerprint comes up is interesting. He was captain of the football team, ran track, was valedictorian for his high school class. He was summa cum laude at Princeton. Becomes a war hero. In 1949, he shoots a guy to death in front of about 30 witnesses, shoots him in the head 5 times. He's sentenced to die by hanging. 6 weeks later, the governor commutes his sentence to voluntary manslaughter, and he's the suspect in about 15 to 20 killings, but they never could put anything on him. So, I mean, what the hell?
Yeah. Man, what the hell is the question? And I think it's one of those things where I think that was a turning point in America when JFK got shot. I think there's been a full communist takeover. I think the world has become a stage. I think every candidate, and LBJ was in on it, obviously. I think every candidate that they have put forth really just has to be okay with the CIA's war campaign, and any person that stands outside of it. This is why they freaked out with Trump. That's how you knew he wasn't in the in club, because they just didn't expect him, and they thought that Hillary was supposed to be Hillary Clinton. She's in the in club. And now we have a circumstance where Kamala Harris is very much in the in club. And
and she's vulnerable.
And she's vulnerable. She's in the in club. She's a vessel. She'll do whatever it is that they want. She has no opinions of her own. She's not even intelligent, if you ask me, plainly. Like she's
not.
She's not even intelligent. And so she's the worst kind of person. She's got no compassion. She lies and feels absolutely nothing. And she's the worst plausible candidate that could get into office right now when we're at such a critical juncture in this country.
Now, I've been doing what I do for a half century, and I'll say this. Probably one of the most unscrupulous, low, poor character category of people you will ever find are career prosecutors. It's okay if you are a prosecutor and then you get out of it. You learn your trade. And not everyone, there are exceptions, but they tend to get so cynical that they don't give a damn anymore. And they'll cut all kinds of corners, and it's about winning the game rather than promoting justice and equity. And I say equity, not this DEI mess, but in terms of fundamental fairness in use of the process for a legitimate purpose. They're ruthless. Also, being involved in this in any extent is not safe. When I had this James Earl Ray case in my courtroom, 3 incidents. I had some detective friends that I used to represent way back when they were just ordinary cops, and they'd follow me around. And I remember one time they said, Judge, you have 2 cars following you. Said, we're behind them. When you get down here, it was Union Avenue and Cooper. Should make a left turn against the no left turn sign and pull in that parking lot, in that gas station that used to be on the corner. I did, and they pulled in right behind, so we got the 2 of them blocked. Okay, next thing, Judge, you need to take this call. It's an emergency. What the devil? So I'm on the bench. We'll take a short 5-minute recess. Yeah, this is Detective so-and-so. I'm out here with so-and-so. Yeah, what's up? Said, some people are trying to break in your Lexus. I said, okay. So keep me posted. About 10 minutes later, I'll get the call again. Judge, they were trying to plant 2 kilos of coke in your car. Now, next thing, it's about 3:30 in the morning. I've got a murder trial going on, and I've been up doing these charges, which you have to read for 5 or 6 hours on a murder case. A lot of work. So I'm home, sitting in my kitchen. I drank a beer. I hadn't even taken my suit coat off. And something woke me up, and I saw 2 people out front from where I was sitting in the kitchen, and I could see into the den area on the other side. There were 3 people out back. They took an interesting device with a large suction cup after they pried the screens out, put it on the plate glass and ran the arm around, with a glass cutter and lifted the center out. So I'm fascinated watching this. I was armed, so let's just say they tried to enter and things got very exciting for the next few. And the next morning, a friend of mine who was the director of police, Winfrey, and another detective that I had represented, they showed up about sunset. And we discovered that for a half hour before this, the dispatcher's tape had been cut off, so they weren't recording. And for 45 minutes afterwards, they weren't. Things got real exciting that night, but it's like I'm just a judge, and I'm looking into it objectively instead of trying to, James Earl Ray, we're going to really do him in. Now, there's a caveat to what happens to James Earl Ray. There was a woman who contacted me along with some other people. She'd come up with an algorithm that relies on the fact that when humans are talking like you and I, only 15% of what you say consists of the words, 35% consists of the tone, and the other 50% is the body language. If they had a clear video recording of somebody talking, they'd run it through the algorithms and they were seeing what bin Laden was really saying and what he meant, or Putin, or whatever it may be. And they would break it down into an animation for the body language and also analyze the tone. So these officers were concerned with Gitmo, and they wanted to make sure they were adhering to their oaths to uphold the Constitution. And they wanted to use this device to evaluate some of the things that they had heard and also to calibrate it. So they got 6 hours of the last taped interview of James Earl Ray that some people in Nashville had done. And they thought they were going to get a real live liar. So in 6 hours worth of tape, they conveyed to me that they were astonished when he was all the way over in the green telling the truth except for two questions, which essentially were versions of, if you didn't do it, do you have any idea who did? And he said, I really don't know. And it was showing neutral or perhaps equivocation. So they said when they were astonished that he was telling the truth, they wanted to come to me because they knew what I was doing on this case. And if the case had gone past James Earl Ray not dying and his lawyer dying in the same week, Memphis, Tennessee lawyer, and Dr. Pepper, who was involved with a lot of these assassinations things, was the foreign lawyer who was involved in this case too, I would have issued a finding that Ray didn't shoot King. Ray wasn't even in town. In the Memphis Police Department's homicide squad, I found had been for years telling the prosecutors, this isn't the man. You got the wrong guy. He wasn't even in Memphis. And it was not one man shot him from the flop house or the bushes under the flop house window. It was two people from the fire station dormitory, the cafeteria, which was directly across the street. They recruited them from the Marine Sniper School in Quantico, Virginia, which is right across the tarmac from the FBI Training Academy. So they supplied an XM-21. They got 5 of them and 5,000 rounds of ammo, and they didn't even have a hostage rescue unit at those times. And the Defense Department wanted them back because they only made 63 barrels and 62 rifles, and they wanted them for the NOM for experimental purposes. So we get into that, and now if you go to the Civil Rights Museum down in Memphis and you look at the exhibit, it says, we once thought that the shot came from the flophouse window, but that's impossible because it wouldn't open up far enough for a rifle to be used, and it didn't come from the bushes. It seems to have come from elsewhere. So after I retired, I had resources, so I started putting them to use, and we got a lot of information that backed that up. And by the way, I'll say this, Jesse Jackson is not the culprit that was collaborating with trying to get King done in. It was somebody else. But when you get into the ins and outs, there's a lot more to the story than the press ever let out.
First and foremost, I would say I think you're lucky to be alive if you were presenting a narrative that was separate
You ever
from the
seen
feds.
John Wick?
Yeah.
Well, my old man taught me how to shoot when I was 6 years old. I had a lot of money to get a lot of practice ammunition. So
when people hear this, right, we're having this discussion and we're really talking about government corruption from the very beginning. I mean, we're talking about potentially a breeding program for world leaders. We are talking about Kamala's entire career really being the product of corruption, whether it's George Soros wanting to cash out on that company, her affair with Willie Brown, what she's obviously doing now, which is she didn't even really run for president. She just kind of has been just became the candidate overnight. We're talking about the murder of MLK Jr., the murder and the assassination of JFK Jr., the feds being behind all of these things. How are people that are watching this supposed to feel anything but completely exasperated with the state of politics in America? Like there is almost, it feels like no hope because we have a complicit media that's working to cover all of these things, gaslighting the American people, trying to squeeze us more on our freedoms, making our kids stupid, right? I mean, like literally, in the future, it's going to be idiocracy in this country because the kids don't even know basic history. People actually believe that everything the media tells them is real. These kids can't even tell you the differences between genders anymore. There's 28 of them.
126.
Where do you derive? Is there 126 now officially? Where do you derive, if you do, any sense of hope in this situation?
Well, it's the people. See, the problem is nobody has opposed any of this because the adversity is between being fair to black folk and being old-time racist. That was the paradigm. But that's not what the case is right now. But the public is being conditioned to we have to be fair to everybody. And it gets a bit ludicrous. Well, he can't help himself. That's what he's compelled. That's his orientation. Well, okay. But I tried a lot of cases as a defense lawyer, a whole bunch of capital cases, murder cases, and I got the youngest person on death row in the world off death row, got a stay execution 23 minutes before he was supposed to be executed. He was 15 years, 2 weeks old at the time, so I've handled a lot of murder cases. But there's something going wrong with the big picture when people say, well, he's compelled. I've met some homicidal maniacs, but just because they are compelled to do something doesn't mean we should tolerate it. You have pedophiles. They're compelled to do stuff, and you can test them. I exercised a provision of Tennessee law when I was on the bench that said the sentencing judge can require any person he sentences to be subjected to a mental health evaluation, which I put together a crew to do this. And you started getting these people who were compelled to do certain things, pedophilia and other stuff, but that doesn't mean you had to tolerate them. At some point, somebody's got to say there's this thing called public peace, dignity, and order, and we have to be conversant with what that means. So you have to protect that because we aren't just isolated 10 miles from the next somebody through a bunch of woods or some scrub desert. People, we're right up under each other. So you have to have this compact with each other about behaving. So when they come up with this bogus thing of the person's compelled, no. See, that's not what the case is. And by the way, we've got a new opportunity here. Black, white, brown, red, yellow, we are all humans. And when you're talking about humans, you're talking about traditional nuclear family. You're talking about manhood, womanhood, childhood. You're talking about courage and bravery and other things that are promoted as part of the human character portfolio. So we have somebody that is against those things. We have an entity that they're trying to cram down everybody's throat. Now, you can't walk in and put a crucifix up in a courtroom or a city hall or a state office building or the state capitol or in Congress. You can't put a crescent up for Islam. You can't put a six-pointed star up for Judaism. You can't put six-armed Shiva for Hinduism. You can't use an image of Buddha, but you can put a rainbow in there. And you see that splashed all over the place where the cities or the municipalities or the federal government in D.C. pays for the sidewalk or the crosswalk to be painted as a rainbow. The White House is lit up with a rainbow. They can't put Christian stuff on an Easter egg, but they can put rainbow stuff on there. You go into school, and they've got rainbow flags and emblems, and you've got transvestites talking to children dressed up like they're female harlots, and you have all of this. It's like they're trying to put a new faith in place as the national faith and cult. Now, people say, but it's not a religion. Oh, yes, it is, but it has no God. Neither does Buddhism. But Buddhism is an ancient and honorable religion, but it has no God. You don't have to have one to be a Buddhist, but you can have any so long as you deal with a system of fair and equitable dealings with other people. But this one is predicated on something nihilistic. It is the first major effort that I can find where it seeks to destroy all of those things that humanity for eons has declared to be something of character. You know, we were hunters and we had to watch each other's backs so we didn't get slaughtered by one of these large animals we like to barbecue during the summer. Or when the ladies were out going and gathering, you could all talk, chat, and protect each other from something that might be looking at you. Oh, that would make a nice snack, lunch, or dinner. You see, so we have these things about altruism and sacrificing for each other because we are conscious and we can understand that we have continuity that we're part of, except for those who don't get that. Now, these things that we hold important, every culture honors bravery, every culture honors courage. Every culture imposes a sense of guilt on people when they deviate from the cultural standards, a sense of shame for not rising to the occasion of doing what you're supposed to. But how many times, oh, it's horrible. We have to get rid of guilt and shame. We shame somebody. In California, that's even against the law to shame somebody. So what time is it? What kind of horrible situation do you have where you're telling humanity you need no guilt, no shame, do what you feel like doing? That breaks down the social compact. That destroys the concept of altruism where there's some things more important than me that I will get recognized as a hero. What did the Spartan mothers tell their sons? Sons, come back with your shield all on it. Don't run. Do what you have to do. Be a man. Women, you had childbirth. And until very recently, childbirth was as dangerous as being in combat in terms of the mortality rate. So both sides of this equation uh, basically had high risk in being humans and doing what you had to do for the next generation. We had a concept of equal worth, but everybody is not equal. Hell, if everybody was equal, somebody 5'6" could go out there and beat LeBron playing basketball and get LeBron's check from the NBA, but you can't do that. So it's equal value, but you have this myth because there are people who don't like themselves and they don't want to act like they have any obligation to anybody else. And we have this nihilistic philosophy. And I remember on campuses around the country, I was in the BSU, Black Student Union, and the Black Student Alliance, and I was community rep for UCLA's BSU, and I got around the country a lot with people. And there was this reaction against that. And people were trying to say, we don't want that anymore. We want, because that's just so barbaric and it causes war and all of this other stuff. And it's like, well, what do you think you are about here? If you weren't in a position of controlling what's going on, there's a lot of stuff that would eat you. Ever been to the Chicago Field Museum? They've got two stuffed lions that between them ate 120 some people back at the turn of the 19th and 20th century. So they've got the actual stuffed pelts in there. And you know, if it wasn't for us being what we do, things would be eating us. So they don't eat us. They exist because we protect them now, or else they're viruses or germs, and we're working on that. So when you get something that's the apex predator on the planet, it by definition kills pretty well. We are the best killers this planet has ever produced, and every other predator or carnivore will occasionally kill itself. Lions do it, tigers do it, panthers do it, bears do it, you know, you name it, and it happens. So we have acculturated and socialized ourselves so we don't do that, and we keep it in check until it's necessary, and then we can become brave and courageous when the response is called for, man or woman. But when you take that away and you don't treat this predator because you're scared of what the predator is, the predator doesn't go away. It just retreats into the back of the person's mind. And since the person is not familiar with that part of himself nowadays, it will jump out and do a lot of damage. Like when you look at all these freaks that are shooting up the hallways or the hoods, you find out that they lack masculinity.